Because Sarah Garr's husband, Robert T. Burton, was away so much of the time, when he did come to the farm, he worked with his boys, and they loved to work with him. They enjoyed his companionship, his wisdom. They always talked about how nice he was to them. He not only came to the farm to work with his sons, but to check up on the stock, take care of the farm matters, or to supervise the construction of outdoor farm buildings such as the hen house in 1871, a tank in the ground for rainwater, 1872, a root cellar in 1872, and a milk house and a three-story granary, 1882, and an ice house in 1890. In addition to the above, there was a red barn, a carriage shed, and a big hay barn and a wagon shed built there. A corral for cattle, a lounging shed, and a machinery shed with a treadmill for horses which turned a wheel that ran the machinery for grinding hay. Harvest time, which her husband enjoyed so much, was especially difficult for Sarah, for there were so many hired hands to feed, and sometimes as many as 16 at one time, in addition to all the Burton grandchildren who came to watch. A nephew-in-law who lived as a boarder in the Burton home in 1884 while going to school said, "The principal or main support of the three families was the farm. Sarah's husband paid most of his attention down there and stayed often. He would drive down to the farm at night and come back up to work in the morning. He had corn, wheat, turnips, mango beets, and a variety of garden produce. Of course, her husband had income from other sources, such as the Wasatch Woolen Mills and the Robert T. Burton Stock Company. When her husband had military or church business in Cache Valley, he took Sarah with him via the railways so she could visit with her brothers in Millville. There she would stay with Abel Garr and his family for several days while her husband completed his business. In the diaries, one can read of the good food that Sarah prepared for the many family parties at the farm, whether it was gathering of young people from the community or family and friends. Such suppers are mentioned as oyster supper, roast beef, stewed chicken, roast turkey, baked pies, fruit, and ice cream. Carl Burton, a grandson of Robert T. Burton's third wife, Susan McBride, said, "One of the great joys of our lives as boys was to go to the farm, which at that time seemed a long distance from the city. If we could stay overnight at Aunt Sarah's, it was a real vacation. The fruit berries, homemade bread, donuts made quite an impression on our young minds, and while we expected to help out on the farm, I have often since thought that Aunt Sarah must have given a sigh of relief when we left." From Maria's diaries, we get a glimpse of much visiting back and forth of the three wives of Robert T. Burton in each other's homes, particularly during the early 1870s, up to the early 1880s. Sometimes they stayed overnight in the home, and they were the home they were visiting. Aunt Maria gave Sarah much assistance in sewing, planting her garden and flowers, and helped in time of illness. The three sister wives worked harmoniously together. They sewed quilts, comforters, carpets, and knitted socks, cooked and canned together, celebrated the birthdays of their children, and helped each other move into new homes. In case of an illness, they stayed in each other's home to help. When death occurred in their families, they mourned and comforted each other. Often Melissa's Burton, Corey Kimball, or Rebecca Burton Jones, Sarah's sister-in-law, stayed with her to help her when a new baby was born. Her garden must have been prolific, for Aunt Maria mentioned picking 70 quarts of strawberries at one time at the farm and bringing back apples to the city to drive. Sarah's daughter, Virginia, recalled that until 1890, I can't remember Father being home very often, but do remember how careful Mother must be of us children not giving information about Father. From the time of the Moorside affair in 1862 until 1890, Mother must have lived in continual anxiety for Father. When he rode into the yard openly after the manifesto, it frightened her because she lived in an anxiety so very long and couldn't believe he would be safe. The federal authorities, who had formerly sought out those who lived in a polygamous relationship, now ignored or merely tolerated such marriages contracted before 1890. They knew that the manifesto of 1890 would create a climate in which plural marriage would eventually disappear. James P. Burton today, this was year 1890, said that one of Sarah Burton's oldest grandchildren leaves this interesting impression of his grandmother. "I remember her as one of the most beautiful women that I ever knew. She always parted her hair in the middle and had a little bob on the back toward the top of the head. She was a beautiful person, a sort of smile, always the kindest eyes that made her countenance more like a lovable grandma, angel than like an everyday kind of person. This is the way she always impressed me. She always acted and looked like a person that had plenty of time to hear your little story, no matter what it was about. She loved everybody. I think she loved animals and persons and flowers and vegetations. I think she loved the world more than any person I ever knew. She cared about everything the farm produced. She knew how to raise most everything: animals, flowers, food, orchards. She had the best knowledge of everything that I can remember. She loved me, I think, as much as my own mother. It seemed like to me I could talk to her about anything. I knew nothing in the world could hurt me if I was close to her. I do not remember the color of her eyes, but they always said to me, "You're safe when you're near me, and I love you." I've never heard a single unkind word. Never was I ever scolded or belittled or made to think that I wasn't doing a good job or that I wasn't working hard. She was so patient and understanding. She wore a big sunbonnet. I never saw in the yard without it. She had a big checkered apron with pockets in it that were about a foot big on each side. I think they would hold about 6 or 8 ears of corn, maybe not the cutler size, but just about that big. A bunch of spuds, some apples, a few radishes and some lettuce, some peas, a few table beets and some carrots. Enough for a good meal for 3 or 4 people. Those pockets were really big. I can't remember when she wasn't carrying something.